Welcome to the Fundamental Baptist Podcast. There are many types of Baptists, but being a Baptist once meant that you were a fundamentalist. Over the years, many Baptists have strayed from the fundamentals and thus attack those who remain true to the faith. This podcast will address the issues surrounding what it means to be a fundamental Baptist.
Somebody said, Brother House, fundamentalists are changing, aren't they? No, fundamentalists don't change. Folks quit being fundamentalists. God says when the troubles come, He said fight. You can't fight. He said withstand. You can't withstand. He said stand. What does it mean to stand? He said don't change. What? Don't change what? Number one, don't change what you believe.
Here we will reason concerning the Scriptures about the doctrines we hold dear. We believe in souls being saved, lives being changed, and Bible doctrines being strengthened by the Word of God. We believe in the local church, soul winning, missions, and everything taught in the King James Bible.
I thank God tonight for this wonderful Bible. You know, I thank God it's a perfect book, and I love the Bible. Doesn't need any addition, no correction, nothing taken from it. Thank God tonight for the Holy Bible. I like it just like it is.
We are not ashamed of being fundamental Baptists, and we want to encourage others to remain true to the Bible, their Baptist heritage, and to not change what they have been given.
You just stick with the book. You can't beat this book. Why does every generation feel that we got to change it just a little bit because our daddy did it like this and our granddaddy did it like that, and let's change it just a little bit? You change it, and things that are different are not the same. The same commit thou to faithful men.
Thank you for joining us in our discussion of what it means to be a fundamental Baptist.
Hello and welcome. My name is David Baker. Welcome to the Fundamental Baptist Podcast. We're glad that you're here and have a very special guest with me today. I jokingly, when I say it, Dr. Bob Gray. So, Dr. Gray, how you doing?
Fine, Dr. Baker.
So, I don't know why I started doing that years ago and on the phone. It's something about the name Bob. It's just like, it's like God. You got to get that big spiritual sound there. So that's why I always called it Dr. Bob Gray. But very good to see you. How you doing?
Doing great, sir.
So you're here at my house. How did this happen?
I love it. I love it. Love the tour.
In the studio, okay?
Yes.
In the studio. So Dr. Gray is preaching for us this weekend. So
yes, sir.
Looking forward to that. By the time this airs, it'll probably be afterwards. So you can't come, but you can go to Family Baptist Church Facebook page, Columbia, Tennessee, and watch the sermons.
I had several pastors who knew I was going to be here, and they asked about the live streaming.
Yeah.
So I got that information. I put it out there.
Awesome. It is there. So first of all, I just want to talk about you. How are you doing?
Doing fine.
For people that don't know, tell us about the last few years, even the last 20 years, with your wife and her health. Married 58 years. And,
correct.
Just had to say goodbye in the last few months.
December 29th at 6:30 in the evening, I held her. She took her last breath and stepped into heaven. The last 10 years of her life in a wheelchair. The last 20 years, very difficult. Hadn't been to church in 20 years. She was very, very difficult. The kids were all there with her to say their goodbyes, but it just doesn't seem real to me at this point. And I find myself, they said Brother Hiles went to his mother's grave and prayed to the dead. And I find myself talking to my wife, but our God's not the God of the dead, but of the living. So she's alive.
Amen.
I don't pray to her, but I find myself talking, because I can still hear her saying to me, shut those lights off. You think we're a bank? And the seatbelt thing, she was a biggie on it. You put that seatbelt on. I'm driving her car. We had two cars. I had a 2006 Cadillac and a 2006 Town Car that I bought for her. It had 800 miles on it when I bought it.
800 miles.
800 miles. And but then her health just went south. And so we never drove it. I drove it on purpose once a month to go to the doctor with her, and just to make sure it didn't sit there.
Right.
And so when she died, I sold the Cadillac and kept the Town Car. So she's with me in that car all the time.
So you're finally driving a Ford Motor Company vehicle?
That is funny now. It really is funny, because I'm a GM man.
Right.
When my wife, when she got ready to buy a car, I told her, I said, yeah, I want you to do a little study on it, find out the biggest and the heaviest car you can find. Because if you're going to have an accident, I want you to win.
Right.
Well, I flew back into town. I've been traveling for 50 years, but I flew back into town. She said, well, I found a car. And I said, good. She said, it's in Tyler, 45 miles away from Longview. I said, good. She said, we need to go over and sign the papers on it. I said, okay, we'll do that. So I got in the car and drove over there, pulled up in this white Tyler Ford. And I'm sitting there looking at her saying, you got to be kidding me.
She didn't tell you before.
No, didn't tell me ahead of time. And she said, well, you told me to get the heaviest model, that 2006 town car, the last big car they built.
Wow.
I mean, it's heavy. And so we went and sat down. Well, the guy who was the finance man was a deacon in my church. And he's laughing at me, and I'm sitting there. So he shoved the paper across the table and said, here, you need to sign this. And he's just laughing at me. I said, I ain't signing it. I slid it down the table. I never did sign it. My wife did. I didn't.
Wow, that's beautiful. So married how many years together?
58 years. The first time, Brother Baker, I saw her was in the 7th grade.
Wow.
I was born in Arkansas, but I was raised in Michigan, 21 years there, southwestern Michigan. And Galesburg was a small town, and Augusta was a small town, and they were so small they consolidated the schools. So it was known as Galesburg-Augusta school system, or GA, the initials GA. So they bused us from Galesburg to Augusta, and so we had phys ed, and I'll never forget. We were phys ed. Girls were leaving, boys were going in, and I saw her across the gym floor. And Brother Baker, as sure as I'm sitting here, I said to myself, that's the most beautiful girl I've ever seen in my life. And I was smitten. I mean, I was smitten.
7th grade.
7th grade. But I'm such an introvert, hard for you folks to believe.
Yeah.
But I took accounting at Michigan State because I didn't want to, in business, because I didn't like people. I just put me in a corner, give me an adding machine. That's how old I am.
Yeah.
And but anyway, I tried to say hi to her, nothing came out. And so that entire year, I never spoke to her. We'd pass each other in the hallway. And I'm telling you, Brother Baker, as sure as I'm sitting here, that I was smitten. And I was not very popular. I was a sports nut. I was a good athlete, but everybody knew her. Everybody knew her. Very popular. And because of that, I just couldn't get my nerve up. So it wasn't until really I got into college and I proposed to her.
Wow.
And but I finally won her over, but it cost me a lot of money. But we just 58 wonderful years.
So 58 years of marriage, and then another, 10 years, or from junior high? How old were you when you got married?
Oh, don't get me started on dates. I can't remember nothing past yesterday. My wife could tell you she dates like that. She's a history buff, and in fact, we were watching PS public station on. I'll think of the guy's name in a minute here. Her favorite author, Civil War, and Lincoln. Anyway, we were watching a program, and he made a statement, and my wife looked at me, and she said, "That's not true. That's not accurate." And I laughed. I said, "How in the world do you know if that's accurate or not?" She said, "Go up on that shelf, that third book from the end, open it up to chapter 12, and look at page 84 on the right-hand side." And I laughed at her. I said, "Yeah, no way. There's just no way. If I was a bet man, I'd bet everything I got on it right now." I went up, took the book, and opened it up, and I'll be switched. If she found her version of history, but she was a history buff.
Wow.
She made a statement one time. She said, "You cannot make history unless you know history," and I've quoted her a lot for that.
That's neat. How many surgeries?
50 surgeries from 1980 until she went to heaven, and it was terrible. but 50 surgeries, mostly bone related, because there was something, I'm not pronouncing this correctly now, but there was part of her thyroid, I'm not pronouncing it right, but parathyroid went haywire. And it took the doctor, it took about 10, 12 years before he discovered what was causing it. And our family doctor went to a medicine expose in New England and came back and called me, and he said, bring Mrs. Gray in, I think I know what's wrong. And so sure enough, he did a count on it and found out that it had gone haywire. So she couldn't assimilate calcium. Her bones splintered. It was terrible.
Can't even fathom that and what it was. So, all right. So, who's she talking to in heaven? What's she doing?
Oh,
what
my
kind of
goodness.
problems? Is
She loved my mother. My mother was her mother in many respects. And she learned how to cook Southern style. She had made the best fried chicken in the world. But she adored my mother. Her mother had multiple sclerosis, was in a wheelchair herself, and was blind. And we took her into our home to try to care for after her dad died. And it was rough. I'll tell you an interesting story. I'm old now, so I'm going to ramble.
Please.
When I proposed to my wife, I was a sophomore at Michigan State, and I got permission from her parents, and then I proposed to her. I started to, and then she said, let me say something. And I said, all right. She said, I'm a nurse. She said, and she'd already graduated from college. And she said, I know there's no genetic connection between multiple sclerosis. I know that. I understand that. I know that for a fact. But I have this fear. I have this fear.
Wow.
I'm going to end up in a wheelchair, or I'm going to end up bedbound. And she said, I know there's no medical connection. I understand that, but I just have this fear. I want to know if you'll take care of me. And
before she said yes?
Before she even said yes to me. And I promised to her, I said, I'll love you forever. And I'll take care of you. So I don't want you to worry. I don't want you to worry a bit. I've made a lot of mistakes, but that wasn't one of them. I took care of my bride. And I just wished there was something I could have done about the health and the pain. But there wasn't anything that I could do. We really, towards the end there, she was in the hospital twice a month. And it was tough. It was hard. And getting her, it was hard.
With all the physical things, amazing though, been around enough and heard her enough, she still had her wit. And mind. And my biggest question for you concerning your wife is, who is going to keep you in line now that she is not here? Because I've been around enough to see her keep you in line. So who is going to do this, Big Sean, now?
Well, my two daughters, they become mother. Yes. They can't. They don't think I can take care of myself, so they're constantly calling all the time. And Karen was at my new home. I moved to Jacksonville, Florida, part of Dr. Greg Neal's church there, Emmanuel. Tremendous church, great pastor. And Dr. Tom Neal is there. Well, Dr. Tom Neal, ministry 50 some years. I'm in ministry 50 some years. We sit together in the front row of the church and make faces at Greg. But anyway, Tom picks on me and I pick on him. We're the two old men. But I'm scared to death my wife's going to get a hold of a lever up there. And and she's going to talk the Lord into doing something to me, so I'll have to be careful.
Well, that was the next question I was going to ask. How did you get to Jacksonville, Florida, and to work with the Neals?
Well,
how did that work out? And what are you guys getting to do?
Sure. It's really working out well. I'm going to be able to teach in the college there. Berean Publications, that's their office. That's where they're at. So I've written 36 books. And so Berean Publications, Mrs. Gray and I joined there in 2016.
Okay.
So it wasn't just a quick decision. But we joined there, and we're going to move. But my wife's health was so bad, and she loved her doctors in East Texas. She loved her doctors. And so she asked me one day, she said, I'm not getting better. I'm getting worse. Can we just go ahead and finish our days out here rather than move there?
Wow.
And Dr. Greg Neal, he found a house for us. He was doing everything he could. He was a blessing. He was a blessing. He helped me financially by buying all of my inventory of my books and moved them to Jacksonville, and said to me, he said, Brother Gray, I'll pay for the printing of all your new books. Won't cost you a thing. And so I get royalties off the books, which is a blessing to me. But it's hard to find a church like Longview Baptist Temple. LBT was a miracle church, an absolute miracle church. And I knew what I had. It wasn't something where I look back and say, oh my goodness, I didn't know. No, I knew. I knew, and I loved it. And it's hard to find a church that's not influenced by society or culture. And so this old-time religion. I love hymns. I sit in some of these churches, Dr. Baker, and I listen to the choir, and I find myself saying, I don't know that song. Or I hear the specials, and I go, I don't recognize that. I don't recognize it at all. And more of it's pity me rather than praising the Lord. And anyway, it's old time, King James only, solid standards, separation, soul winning, tremendous mission program, a tremendous soul winning pastor and church. And so I again, we were going to move there, but her health just kept getting worse, and she died in her bed. She wanted to be home, and so we would have moved to. I'm there now. I've been there, seventh week.
Awesome.
And I have a home. Bought a home there, and they take such good care of me. I've got a secretary there that Dr. Neal is assigned to me. And they pick me up, take me to the airport, and bring me back. And flying out of Jacksonville is much easier than flying out of Longview.
I bet.
A lot easier.
So, Dr. Tom Neal and Dr. Bob Gray together, what kind of trouble are you guys going to get into? Any projects?
Yeah, we've got to do. We sure do.
What's going on?
We've got a podcast we're going to do. Him and I are going to do it together.
Wow. From
the front pew. We always sit in the front. We stagger down there and sit down in the front pew. And so we're going to do a podcast. We're working on it now. Working on a book, Setting the Record Straight.
Setting the record straight.
Yeah.
So, you mean there's some things in history that people don't maybe know the rest of the story?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it is. And with his insight, my insight from experience now, not hearsay.
Right.
Not hearsay. And we'll deal with things, try to set the record straight, because there are a lot of false things being said out there that just are not true. And I know better, and Tom knows better. And so we're gonna have a good time with the podcast. I'm really excited.
That should be interesting. That should be fun.
If I were a young preacher, I'd tune in.
Absolutely. I want to start back. I wanted to deal with where you're at right now. I wanted to start back with salvation, call to ministry, how you found Independent Fundamental Baptist. I know you didn't grow up that way.
Right.
We both grew up American Baptist,
right.
Too. So salvation, surrender, ministry, all that.
Okay, I'm ashamed to say this. I'm ashamed to say it. But I'd go to, my mama was faithful. She was the Christian influence in our home. My dad later on got right with God, but it was towards the end. I'd go to church and snuggle up next to Mama, and me and my brothers would kind of take a nap. And I'm ashamed to say that. But one night, the pastor of the American Baptist Church got up and preached a hot sermon on hell. And I sat up for the first time in my life. And I remember looking at my mama and saying, "Who's he mad at?" And she said, "Son, he's not mad, he's preaching." And I didn't say it out loud, but I said, "Oh, he's mad at somebody." But I sat on the edge of my seat. And he listed, he went down, this group's going to hell, this group's going to hell. Now, and when the first one, I went, boy, I'm not guilty of that. But I'm listening now. Second one, not guilty of that. And he mentioned some sins. I had no idea what in the world he was talking about. But he got down to liars. And when he said liars shall have their part in the lake of fire, oh my goodness.
Uh-oh.
I said, oh my goodness. And for the first time in my 11 years of age, I said to myself, I'm going to hell. And I went to the altar, Dr. Baker, and a Sunday school teacher came by. I was crying. Patted me on the back, prayed for me. Deacon came up, patted me on the back, prayed for me, but never opened the Bible.
Wow.
I went home that night, got ready for bed, and I'm standing outside of my bedroom, old farmhouse, and I'm crying, and my mama, God bless her, she come up and she said, "Son, what's the matter?" I said, "Mama, I'm going to hell. I don't want to go to hell." And she quoted Romans 10:13. And she said, "Son, now you get into that bedroom in there, you shut that door, and you get on your knees and ask Christ to save you, and he will." And she made this statement, he's never turned anybody down. And so I did. I got saved that night. And I wish I could tell you, they give us Sunday school quarterlies. We never studied the Bible. We read our quarterlies and regurgitated it the next Sunday in front of the class. So for 15 years, I went to church, but I was not sold out. And then I went to a sword conference and heard Dr. House and Dr. Rice in South Bend, Indiana. Dr. Charles Davis was the pastor, Grace Baptist Church. And buddy, I cried, I laughed, I cried, I laughed, and I dove in that altar. I said, I can't keep going the way I am. I wasn't smoking, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't cussing, I wasn't doing any of that. But I wanted my life to count.
Yeah.
And so that I gave my life to the Lord. Little did I know what would happen. But
So how old, you already married?
Married, yeah, we got married.
How long after that did you go to Bible college? And
I was part of the first 4-year class of Hyles-Anderson, 76. But I did it in 2.5 years. I wanted in and I wanted out. And so I was there in the early 70s, and a tremendous impact on my life, just tremendous impact. My whole focus was on the man of God. I watched him, paid attention to him, and but my education is a 2-for-1. You had Hyles-Anderson and you had First Baptist Church. You had 2-for-1. 2 educations for the price of 1. But it was the early days. Of course, we all say this. Those were the best days, when we say that. I learned so much. I'll tell you who really helped me on the soul winning part was C.W. Fisk. C.W. Fisk had me sit with his converts. Called it a buddy system.
Yeah.
And so I would sit with his converts and I'd walk them down the aisle.
Wow.
And I got a taste of it. And I said, this is what I want to do.
How did you get close to Dr. Hyles? I know you guys traveled together. How many times did you preach together?
22 years. The first time in 1978 in Memphis, Tennessee, we preached together. And 22 years. Now, not every week.
Sure.
The last 11 years now was almost every week with the Fundamentalist Steering Committee. But at least once a month. And, he was such a... I don't know. I've caused so many people headaches. Some of the things I've preached, some of the things I've said. but he was so patient with me and loving, and helped me tremendously. And I always felt like that I could ask him anything, and he would help me.
What do you see the difference today with preachers? I mean, Brother Howells kept pushing, growing, reaching, building. You know, he stayed the same. He didn't change on his doctrines. He got stronger and didn't, you know, what do you see the difference today in the preachers today and Brother Howells? I know that's a big question, but I don't know, you've written books about Brother Howells and great information there, but
in the early days, pastor school, most everybody went to learn how he built and was building a church. I've noticed through the years they started to come to be around Brother Howells more than learning how to build. And I think the mindset was different. He said to me one time when people brought a question about repentance, some things that he had written and some things that Dr. Rice had written, and they were using that against Brother Howells, against me, and against Curtis Hudson. And his answer to me was, some people grow, some people don't.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful. The early days, Brother Howells was growing and teachable, always teachable. I probably shouldn't tell this story, but I'm going to go ahead and tell it anyway. One Wednesday night, Brother Howells walked out with a stack of Bibles, and on one side, and the King James Bible on the other side. And I tried to be perceptive, but I panicked. And you have to understand, Brother Roloff and I were able to, he preached for me 9 different times. I preached for him, preached with him. I called Brother Roloff that night after church, and I said, Brother Roloff, I'm worried about something. I said, Brother Howells came with a stack of Bibles over here and a King James over here, and Lester Roloff chewed me up and spit me out. And I mean, he said, son, Jack's got more sense in his little finger than you got in your whole body. He said, you don't worry about Brother Howells. He's going to land on his feet.
Wow.
That was his statement. And he did. But so you have to be careful. There are books that Ray Young has written about letters, and if you go back to the early days and then you follow the progression through, and somewhat I think it's a little unfair. I love you, Ray, but I think it's a little bit unfair because the first part looks like it's almost justifying Jack Scott's position, which I did not like. But Brother Howells grew. Brother Howells, Al Lacey, for example. Al Lacey had a sermon he preached, The Perfect Book. And he and Brother Howells were preaching together. And so Al Lacey preached his sermon, The Perfect Book, the King James Bible without error. Brother Howells walked over, Brother Howells, the second speaker, walked over to Al Lacey and shook Al Lacey's hand and said, you pulled me over. And he said, I want you to come to Hammond and preach that sermon. And Al Lacey did. He went to Hammond and preached it. And Brother Howells made the statement, this is our position on the King James Bible.
Yeah.
I'll give you another example. Am I rambling too much here?
I love this.
Okay.
This is what I want. Yeah.
All right. I was on the board at the Sword of the Lord, where some people may not know that. But Dr. Curtis Hudson sent a letter to me with a book in it, and it was Gail Rippler's book, New Age Versions. I still have the letter. Dr. Hudson said, I'm writing this to all the board members to let you know this is our official position.
Wow.
At the Sword of the Lord. And I wrote him a letter back thanking him. And Gail Rippler is probably hated by more people, but more sense on this issue. And she's not a preacher, doesn't claim to be. Very fine lady. But everybody grew. We all grew. I did.
And when that issue came out, King James taught that, but didn't understand the issue as much, but we had to with what was coming out there. And I remember reading Brother Howell's older books, and where he would say, a better rendering of the verse would be, or, the translators, should have translated it this way in his early days. And then in his early soul winning, Mr. Smith, are you now ready to turn from all your sins,
Yeah.
But like you said, he grew,
Absolutely.
And if we have to live by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God, then there has to be an every word Bible.
Right.
Logic must prove the King James
That
Bible.
was his last Bible study, by the way. Every word Bible.
Yeah.
And before he went to heaven.
Brother Gray, I want to ask you something, and you don't have to go into it if you don't want to, but when Bill Howells passed away, and I know just for how close you are, how devastating that had to be. And then at the church, our alma mater, Brother Scott being chosen as a pastor, to me, it didn't seem like, and Brother Scott was one of my teachers and had no problem with him, as a teacher. It didn't seem like that was who Brother Howells chose or wanted to be the pastor. When you read what he taught about it, I was there on the Wednesday night Bible study when he taught how to call a pastor. And then he put it in his book, Science of the Christian Life, Volume 2. You were closer to that than I was. What happened?
In August of 2000, before he died in 2001, we were preaching together in Minneapolis, St. Paul. In the car, going the pastor picked us up at the airport. We're in the car. He turned to Brother Howells and said, "Which one of your staff members can take First Baptist Church?" Dr. Howells went staff member by staff member by staff member, bragged on all of them, but told why he said they can't. This person cannot. This cannot. That was every staff member, including Jack Scott. Now this is in August of 2000.
He passed away in 2001.
Right.
So August, the year before he passed away.
Right. And he said about Jack, he said he's an A+ as a son-in-law, which did not turn out to be true. But he's C+ as a fundamentalist, too much Pillsbury. Now that's in August. I refer you back also to a full-page ad that Brother Howells put out that said, "Who's going to take my place?" I think I'll take my own place. So all of this about the mantle and all this other stuff is baloney. Brother Jack was on the church staff, and Brother Howells sent him back to the college. So I have all of this in my head, and understanding all of that. I don't think there's no doubt in my mind. And then when you listen to his Wednesday night Bible study, it was always somebody on the outside. He never referred to anybody on the inside taking it.
Yeah.
Never. Now, as to the controversy about me wanting a First Baptist Church, Russell Anderson, my good friend, called me and said, I've given him your name. And I said, "Dr. Anderson, you hate me." I said, "Look, if they call me in, that church is going to go from 20,000 down to 3,000 because I was running 3,000 at the time." I said, "Because that's my level." And I said, "So don't do that to me. And if nominated, I will not run.
Wow.
I'm not going to do it." He said, "Well, I'm just curious." He said, "What would you do if you took it?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you what I'd do. I'd take every staff member, take them down to that auditorium, put them in the front section, and say, every one of you cotton pickers better get somebody saved and walk down the aisle tomorrow." I would do it with all meetings on Saturday, and we're going soul winning. We're not going to be maintenance department only. We're going to be producers. So I'm wired different.
Yeah.
I'm just wired different, and only LBT could put up with me. Nobody else would. And now after Jack took over, people criticized me for going and preaching at pastor school. But let me say this in my defense: that was Brother Howell's son-in-law. That was First Baptist Church's choice, not mine, but theirs. And I respected Brother Howells enough to give him a chance. And I respected the local church. We're not a denomination.
Right.
So there is no headquarters. Murfreesboro is not our headquarters.
Yeah.
Longview is not our headquarters. So I felt like that I'm a Hyles Edison grad and supposedly one of the top 3 graduates out of that place. So I felt like I did. I went and taught and I preached, and if I had to do over again, I'd do the same thing. So I did not want First Baptist Church Hammond. My wife, I couldn't have done it with my wife's health.
Right.
And my capacity. Not my height. I mean, I've had days of 5,000. I knew how to organize. I knew how to win souls, get people down the aisle, baptize, and so on. Last year I pastored, we baptized 4,464 people, so I know how to do that. But I don't think I could have handled that.
It's amazing because people, accuse you of being jealous. You didn't get it. That's why you don't like Jack Scott. And, they have no idea this. I mean, here it is. Brother Hyles passed away February 6th. My birthday's February 5th. He had surgery on the 5th. He passed away that morning in 2001. So this is 6-7 months before Brother Hyles passed away, and he looked at you and said, Jack Scott is a C+ fundamentalist. You don't choose someone that's a C+ fundamentalist to take the First Baptist Church of Hammond, Indiana. And when you look at, because I talked to someone recently about that, and they said, oh, yeah, they were on the committee. They said, yeah, we followed Brother Hyles' lesson and to a T. And I said, no, you didn't. No. And the first point is the King James Bible, don't pick somebody that thinks it's only preserved in the originals, and well, we didn't know that then. Okay, then it said call a pastor who goes to pastor school every year. Right. Call someone who sends their students. Call someone who runs their church, a smaller version of this church. I mean, everything had to do with a pastor. If you were following that to a T, is Jack Scott a pastor? Nope. And neither was Jeff Owens, and he's a good friend of mine. But those, they could not have been even considered if they would have followed Brother Hyles, call a pastor. Knowing what we know now, and I don't fight Brother Scott after he fell. I wrote him. We wrote back and tried to help encourage him and things there. So I'm not trying to say this to tear down him at all. But now that we know what he taught on the King James Bible and what he believed, now you know what Brother Hyles knew. My son-in-law is a C+ fundamentalist, and he can't take this. So I don't know. I know you can't go back and redo
now,
anything.
he bragged on Jack. I mean, I'm not saying that and all those staff men, but he also told why.
Right. Wow. It's sad because, boy, so many people.
Don't you think, I'm just opposing this to you.
Yeah.
Don't you think there should have been a morning time? I mean, it was so quick.
Right.
And I think that they were so concerned about pastor school coming up and concerned about the church's position, the college, and all of that, that you can't manipulate.
Yeah.
I think it was just too soon.
It seems like, I don't think at Crown, the church there, I don't think they've chosen pastor after Clarence Sexton's passed away. And I think, they're waiting that time and praying and trying to find out what God wants.
Very wise.
You do think it would have been a whole lot better that way, because so many people, we still see it today, they were hurt with what was taught by Brother Scott, even about the King James Bible, and most people didn't know where to go to get the answers. And so if all you hear is this, okay, here's the 1611 and here's what you have. See, this is different. You don't have a 1611, without understanding a printing error, without understanding, okay, all the changes, the fonts and spelling, and things like that. And so many things people didn't know, and like they really hurt. It hurt a lot of people, that many of them have never recovered from that, I believe. Do you feel that?
You're teaching on the King James Bible, and of course, Dr. Ripplinger's involvement in our world. Yeah. I just wish I had known some of this years ago.
Well, she is amazing, and just like you said, she's so sweet. If anyone ever talks to her, so sweet, so kind, so unassuming. Sometimes I'll ask her something, and she'll say, Brother Baker, that's not for me to decide. Okay, thank you. I mean, never usurp any authority at all. She goes, I'm a handmaid. God gave me a mind and the time to do this research and study that pastors don't really have time to do and pastor their churches.
See, the Greek New Testament that we were given at Hyles Edison is not a Greek New Testament.
a back translation from
exactly.
the King James Bible in 1880.
Right.
The RV committee wanted to see what a Greek manuscript of the King James would look like, and so they had Scribner
Did they tell you
back
that?
translated. No,
They didn't tell me that.
no. When I went to college, I was so simple. I thought, when I graduated, this is what I thought: the King James Bible is perfect English, and the Texas Receptus is the perfect Greek, and they line up perfectly. Yay! And that just fit so well. And then you get out there in the ministry and you realize that's not true. And if people don't know where to go to get the answers, then they're not going to be independent, fundamental, King James Bible believers, because all they're hearing from is the James Whites and the Mark Wards and the people like that. And that's all they're hearing, and they don't know where to go to get the answers on that. And it's sad because they're giving up. And I've talked to some different guys in different colleges. It's like, look, we've got to teach the preacher boys these answers, or they're not going to be. How much time and money is spent to train a preacher boy? Okay, and if they don't know this answer, they're not unless they work for a good church with a good pastor who knows this. They'll not be independent fundamental Baptist in 5 years. It's sad, and just to be able to know. I remember in Bible college, somebody said, "Hey, I heard this guy who said the King James Bible corrects the Greek. What do you think?" I said, "That's stupid. How can the King James Bible correct the Greek? The King James Bible came from the Greek. That's perfect Greek, and this is perfect English, you know?" And then you realize, okay, there's not one Texas Receptus. When they had the King James Summit, and I went there, and I was on the second row, and I found out later they had security ready to take me out.
Me too.
Thought I was going to cause a problem.
It followed me all around.
When they had the question and answer, I wrote some questions out, and Brother Scott didn't read any of mine, but I'm on the second row, so he's going through them. And one of the questions was, "What Greek do you use?" And he looked at me and he said, "I don't know what this means." And I said, "Simple. What Greek do you use?" He said, "I don't know what you mean." I never clarified it. I just asked him the question 3 times again. "What Greek do you use?" And he goes, "The Texas Receptus." And I said, "Which one?" And he had this impish look. When he looked back at me with an impish smile, he goes, "I use a lot of them." Like, oh, you know there's more than one Texas Receptus. Because most people don't know that. There's, quote, the Texas Receptus. No, there's 6 different strains of Texas Receptus, and many of those have different additions to them. So here's the question. I asked a guy, he called me a kook at a national, quote, King James conference. You know him well. He used to work for you. But online I asked him this question. I said, so when the King James Bible disagrees with the Greek, which one is right? He goes, "I believe in preservation." Good, me too. When the King James Bible disagrees with the Greek, okay, let's say it's Elseviers 3rd edition, okay, or Beezer's 4th edition, or let's say it's Scribner, okay, none of them agree. No Texas Receptus agrees with all the other ones, so they all disagree. When that Greek disagrees with the King James Bible, which one is right? I asked him that question 4 times, and every time he answered it, I believe in preservation. Me too. Answer the question, wouldn't answer it. Because, quote, the King James Bible is perfect. None of those Greek New Testaments are. No professor claims that they are. And so guess what the King James Bible does? Quote, corrects the Greek. You know, and we don't speak Greek anyway. We don't speak Koine Greek, and the only thing you have to do is go to look at some lexicon. When you study the guys who put the lexicons together and what they believe, what their doctrine actually was, it's so bad because in Thayer's, I think it's in Thayer's Greek, they say in the beginning he is, I forget what they call his doctrine, but they even warn that some of his definitions lean back to that false doctrine. That's in Thayer's Greek. They even have to explain that before. If they're admitting it before, and how do you know which one? We quote in the Greek. No, you don't know. Anyway, it's just a whole other thing. But anyway, it seemed to mess so many people up that they don't trust their Bible anymore. And where they end up, who knows? We have to have a foundation. You know, we have to have an authority.
You're going to take time and read, like Gail Rivenger's material.
Yeah.
Because it's so rich. But a lot of guys, we just don't read.
She's a woman, so obviously nothing could be
I was
right
sitting
because
next
she's
to
a
my
woman.
son Scott. When Jack Scott said, "I don't get my doctrine from a woman," I leaned over to my son Scott and I said, "You did. You got it from your mother."
It's amazing. Brother Howells was so humble. And, his statement, he said, everyone knows something that I don't.
Yeah.
Hence, all men are my teachers, and women too. I mean, he loved Miss Riplinger, honored her, gave her a doctorate, and so respected her because it was truth. It's truth. It didn't matter that she wrote it. I thought it was interesting when the book first came out, it wasn't Gail Riplinger, it was G.A. Riplinger. Everyone knew it was a guy because she knew if it was a lady, people wouldn't read it. The wisdom of that. But anyway, people would get so much, they're afraid of it. They're afraid of her. Guys, you hear people even our guys talk about this issue, and it's like, wow, so many of them don't have a clue.
What bothered me was the slander.
Yeah.
It's uncalled for.
Yeah.
On the merits of the issue, make your decision on that, but not slander.
Yeah.
To the house, he would travel. He'd pick up stuff, throw it in the back of his Bible. I finally got my nerve up one day, and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm collecting ideas.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back and put it in a book and sell it back to him."
Amen.
And he did.
Amazing. So I know you haven't traveled as much when your wife was sick and things there, but you're out there and you're around. What do you see? How many churches got it, doing it? How many are struggling? And what is they're struggling? What are the issues? What are the things that you see?
The ones who have stayed with the template, like Dr. Alan Domley at Bethany Baptist Church outside Oklahoma City, I preach for him and teach for him in his old PAS conference every March, third week in March. He has it together, and it's wonderful to see what he's doing and how he's organized the Sunday school and the outreach, the soul winning. But he personally does it himself.
You mean it still works? It's
Absolutely.
2024. Come on,
He started the church with 100. No, I'm not barely basing on the numbers, but he's running 700 now, 6 years later. So I think numbers are what they are. Dr. Greg Neal at Emmanuel Baptist Church is where I'm a member, is a soul winner. His staff they're soul winners, and they win people and get people down the aisle. So those are two that I'm very familiar with, and there are others that I think are going to be coming along. But we've got I call them seedlings. They're all over the place, just nobody knows about them yet. There are a lot of men who may be running 50 to 100 that eventually be running 1,000.
Yeah.
That are out there.
So when people are still winning souls, baptizing, preaching, teaching, King James Bible, that still works. You can still do that. You don't have to go to the rock and roll show and the ESV.
Well, I think it goes back to John Rice's discernment about Billy Graham. And his statement about Billy Graham was, he has the fruit, but he's killing the orchard. And that's why he loved about Brother Hiles. Brother Hiles kept the orchard healthy, so that far beyond his death, it still was going to be done. The same thing that worked in the book of Acts worked in Hammond, it worked in Longview, it's worked in a lot of places. When we start when our young guys, about Daniel, it says he's a dissolver of doubts. When we start listening to people who question this and question that, and abuse here and abuse there, and so on and so forth, they're throwing cold water on young men who have bright futures. But they're so negative. Who hadn't been hurt? I've been in this thing 52 years now. And if you don't want to get shot at, don't get in the battle,
Yeah. It is. I know I've heard you talk about a young preacher deciding what kind of preacher he's going to be. And how many times do we not go to the end and decide that and direction? Because, if you're trying to, I was in the military and we had to have maps and finding and compass and all that, and you pick that point that you can see that far away, and then you're able to guide to that point. But you have your end destination, your next hilltop that you're going towards. And it seems like so many times today it's not. We're looking at the shiny objects, or, wow, he's really growing. What is he doing? I'll do that. He's really growing. Okay, let me do that. Without any set plan direction of where you want to end at. Do you see that?
Yeah, and the Bible's answer is very simple, considering the end. If just get your concordance down, look that up. considering the end, ought to be what all of us do. Back when I was trying to decide what Bible college to go to, there were two prominent fundamentalists in the lead during that day, during the early 70s. And that was Jerry Falwell and Jack Iles. Well, I went to went to First Baptist Church. I'd heard Brother Iles before on a Sunday night, and it was amazing. Then I took my family and we went to Jerry Falwell's.
Wow.
And I remember my family and I pulling up at the old Thomas Road Baptist Church. And we were sitting there, and of course we're deciding. I mean, my daddy always said, if you go, whatever you can do, go to the best. You're going to learn how to do something, go to the best. Well, there were the two top men of God at that time. So we were sitting in the car, and I told my family, I said, let's pray. We're sitting in the parking lot. And I said, oh, God, I said, help me. I've got my wife, I've got my children, the whole future is dependent on this decision. I looked up, and out of the gymnasium came girls in a basketball team, had shorts on, had basketball, the coach standing there with the basketball in his hands, and the girls all lined up behind. And I thought, So I said to the janitor there, we got out of the car, and I said, what's that? He laughed. He said, what do you think it is? It's a basketball team. I said, no. Well, why the shorts? And he said, well, that's what you wear when you play basketball. So we went to the service, and they had background music. Doug Oldham sang. He's a Nazarene preacher. They paid him $1,000 a week to sing on the old time gospel hour. That was his job. And I came home, and I wrestled and wrestled and wrestled. And it boiled down to character or talent. And I thought, this is it over here, the character part. Learn how to play the instrument.
Yeah.
Practice. This just talent oriented. I can't hire Doug Oldham for $1,000. Right. So I decided to follow what I considered the end. And I said, I want my kids to be kids of character and discipline, not talent oriented.
Amen. Well, you're an old, grizzled veteran. So any regrets?
Cataract surgery. No. No, I don't like the what if game. Yeah. I don't like to play that mental gymnastics. I don't like it. I don't do it. I'm tempted to, but I can't do it. What's done is done. I have if I had to start over again, I'd do everything exactly like I did it. Because I had no idea what the future holds, but I know what is right is right. And I like what Brother Howes used to tell us. He'd say, look, when you're young and your mind's sharp, why would you second guess when you get old, senile, what you figured out was right when you had your right mind about you?
Well, being 78 years old and, thousands and thousands of people saved and baptized and reached and trained and things all over the world, no regret that you chose Brother Howes and not,
We started 1,700 churches around the world with our little missions program.
Wow.
We gave $9.3 million to missions. Wow. So that people who say I'm a kingdom builder and all this crazy stuff, you don't do that by giving away $9.3 million. Right. And you don't do it by sending people out around the world. And Brother Howes proved himself in his proofs in the pudding. And I'll tell you what was aggravating to me. When I was at Howes Anderson, my wife was Dr. Evans' secretary. I was known as Mrs. Gray's husband. But I would fill pulpits in the area when they would call the college and say, we need somebody to fill it. Well, Dr. Evans was kind to me, and he said, why don't you go up and fill? He said, he told me one day, Brother Gray, these are churches that Brother Howes and John Rice and Round Robin, they would go to. That was the connection. And so I would go and I'd preach for them, and then they would say to me, Jack, called him Jack. I was there calling Brother Howes Jack. They did. Jack can build a great work, but none of his boys can. And it aggravated the fire out of me. And I told my wife, I said, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to show that can be. And not just me, but look at
Sure.
Kevin Wynn's running 40,000. Wow. Rick Martin, and we'll tell him what he's doing over there in the Philippines.
Yeah. It's right, and it works. So a few years ago, 8 some now, we started this thing called Independent Baptist Online College. So
Amen.
We've been able to work together for a few years on that. What do you think, future college direction training, what do you see out there? How could this be a help to churches and pastors? You've been a part of this. You were a part of college. You had your own college. Your thought on training people for the ministry today.
Here's the tremendous. Well, first of all, if Dr. Jack Hyles were alive today, I would send people to the man. Mm-hmm. There is no Jack Hyles on the scene.
Right.
There is not. Highland Park doesn't exist. Emmanuel Baptist in Pontiac doesn't exist. And on I could go. They don't exist. They just don't exist. So there is no place to send them. The great thing about Independent Baptist Online College is the fact that we have people who are 30 years in the ministry who are able to teach and to help these students see through their eyes what has worked. And these are not anti. I don't know, where did the IFB? Where did that come from? I like initials, but I don't know where in the world that came from. But so it's the pastor can help his young people, keep them there, and then get them through college and guide them through college, the courses they take, and guide them through it and spend time with them. And then with our Judea project at the college, then they can start churches within 60 miles of where they're at and help them. Send soul winners, buses of soul winners over there and help them to be able to reach their area. So I'm excited about it. Where else are you going to go get 2,500 students like this after, eighth year, I think? Eighth year?
It's amazing.
It's absolutely, it's a miracle, really. But thank you for your leadership, by the way.
I just been fun being a part of it. But it is amazing to have Dr. Tom Wallace, 70 years experience. To teach 3 classes so far for us. Dr. Wendell Evans, president of Hammond College, taught a history course for us. Just love that. B.G. Buchanan, Les Hobbins are already in heaven today. Right. And we have their courses, Jim Beller on Baptist history, and just great things to be able to have, and that we're going to have these for decades. Could you imagine? I don't know. You went through in 2.5 years. I finished in 3. I came out of the Army, and I got to get done because I wasted some years of my life.
So you knew what I was talking about, didn't you?
And so. And I never skipped a class, never missed, never slept in one. I soaked up everything. I took all the notes that I could. But as you know, when you're in Bible college, you don't need most of that right now. They're training you for later on, and hopefully you'll catch enough of it. But can you imagine how much fun it would have been in the ministry if you'd have had a video recording of every lecture, of every course that you had with every teacher? So when you face that problem, I remember Brother so-and-so taught about this, and you can pull it up and watch that lecture to get that help. How amazing would that be? So,
and it's available now. Yeah. And it's the age that we're living in.
Yeah.
And the technology is absolutely amazing. And the reaching foreign countries using their language and the technology.
That's something we're working on, being able to take our courses and convert them with AI to another language. That's going to be a fun thing to do. So talk about Project 66. That was your idea back. I remember years ago you talking about it. It wasn't that, okay, I got things to do, but it's happening now.
Yeah, we only got 25 as of right now. I may be less than that, but 25 books to go, but it's been my dream from day one to have every book of the Bible taught. Wow. If I were living in a church, I'd like a resource where I could, I'm talking about fundamental Baptist now, independent fundamental Baptist, but go and just absorb it. And it really, to have only 25 to go is amazing, really. I'm working on Deuteronomy right now. I did Leviticus on purpose. because of the fact I wanted to make sure, if you're going to tackle something, it can be done.
It is.
Must be done.
And it's amazing how people shy away from that. How many people say, "Oh, that's just Old Testament. That doesn't matter." It's like, and so is "Thou shalt not kill." "Thou shalt not commit." Are those things not? So many things they Deuteronomy 22:5 and throw it away. That's Old Testament. Well, women's bodies haven't changed.
No.
Men's bodies haven't changed. Modesty is still an issue.
Right.
There's still temptations that are out there. Why in the world wouldn't we want? And boy, Brother Howes taught this. I remember that little pamphlet, the unisex movement, and what was going on. When did you preach that? 60s?
Yeah.
And 70s, and people, no big deal. And they look and see what's happening today with the trans movement. And,
there's more to that sermon than just a pants issue.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's deep.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have missed out on the insight that he had. Amazing insight.
Yeah. So they didn't believe it then, but boy, we're seeing it now.
Yeah.
And
the Old Testament provides parameters for doctrine in the New Testament. On forgiveness, you take 2 doves, take a goat, kill a goat, and send it out, never to come back again. There's great teaching there.
Yeah. I've enjoyed this casual conversation, just talking, and hopefully people listen to it.
Amen.
Going to enjoy it too, because I think a lot of times we don't see that side. We hear Dr. Bob Gray and the preacher, but preachers are humans too, and we have life and hurts and heartaches and tears and losses, and it's amazing to me how sometimes people have treated preachers through the years, and they think you're a preacher. They don't have to be kind. They don't have to be loving. They don't have to have ethics and character and things like that. And it's amazing how many times you got to just die to that and keep serving God. And through the kind of things that we've been through, so many times I'm reminded when I want to have a pity party, is like, okay, and what did Christ go through for me? How much did I go through for him? You wake up real quick and forgive me, Lord. We have no room to talk, when Jesus went through hell, for us. So anything on your mind, anything you see, anything that you'd love to help people, Christians with?
Well, let me say this to parents. When your child chooses through his own will to do something that's contrary to the Word of God, you don't blame yourself. I would tell church members, if you're going to blame me for your kid going bad, you're going to have to give me credit for the one that went right.
Yeah.
I don't want either.
Right.
Paul said, to will is present with me. So everybody has a will. And I hurt right now. I'm dealing with some pastors. I hurt for them because they feel like that maybe they failed some way with their child when they didn't. Because every child comes to that fork in the road. They've got to make a decision. If they make a dumb decision, it's because they are a dumb kid, not because the teaching was bad or so on. So I don't want pastors to, to feel like that they failed because a child has chosen a different direction. They have that right.
Yeah.
They have faced God over it. But I never have understood how, picture in your mind a boat and so on, and a kid jumping out of the boat being the local church, and the parent jumping out into the water with the kid who's escaping the boat. Stay in the boat. The prodigal dad stayed home.
Yeah.
He kept the farm going, so the kid had a place to come back to. And if you chase that backslidden kid, let's say they're 16, well, they're going to get married at 18 or 20, and they're not going to check on you.
Yeah.
They're not coming back to check on you. So now you've lost your friends, you've lost church friends, you've lost your pastor, you've lost everything chasing a backslidden kid. Because when he gets married, he's not going to check on you. So you've lost everything by doing that. So I think like the prodigal, the dad stayed home, kept the farm going, and the boy came to his senses and chose to come back.
That's good. I was the prodigal, moved out of the house in high school, told my parents wouldn't live by their rules, finished high school in a party apartment, joined the Army, crazy wild life, and then you finally wake up and come to yourself and go, what am I doing? And come back, and my dad, I've been his pastor now for 28 years, and the best man at my wedding.
Isn't
and
that something?
You realize what an idiot I was. You got to come home with yourself and make it right.
Tim Lee said to me one time, he said, man, I was fed up. My dad told me, cut my hair, get out of bed, and say, I'll fix him, I'll join the Marines.
It was amazing how many times some of the most rebellious join the military for the strictness and the authority, and someone who's going to make us do what we know we're supposed to do. It really is that way. And that is really good, helping parents, because how many parents follow their kids and mess up their own life. Brother Barry, friend of yours and mine, heard him preach, don't sell the farm.
No.
And compared it to that. You know, if you sell the farm and you change when your kid comes back, you have nothing to come back to. And just to be able to stand right. It's amazing, even as a pastor, I've been in this town 31 years, how many people come back because they said, hey, Brother Baker's not changed, Pastor Baker's not changed, still doing the same thing, still believes the same thing, and guess what? Hey, it works. You know, it does. So awesome. Well, thank you. We'll enjoy this weekend and preaching together, and thank you for taking the time to do this, and hope it's a help. Give us a couple of your latest books, and if people, what they need to read, what it could be a help to them, and where would they go to get this?
The Lost Commandment I would recommend for every parent to get, and pastors, by the way, it would be a good Bible study series on Wednesday night. I have a book on Absalom, which is intriguing. You'd be pleasingly surprised when you get the book and read it. I also think it could be a Bible study series. I have several books on Brother Hiles, introducing Jack Hiles to the next generation. I think probably would be one that maybe would help. I would reread all of Brother Hiles' books.
Amen.
I would reread The Soul Winner's Fire by John R. Rice. It gets to me every time. It's not even in print. You'd have to go to eBay to find it. eBay. Aren't you proud of me?
How many, boy, just to go through those again, I know in our college we have, for this month of June, anyone who gets a course, we're giving them Brother Hiles' book on prayer. And it's new, it's hardback, it's laid out well. How long has it been since someone's read that? And how much truth could they get out of going back to read
it's amazing. And I, just a suggestion, I think a lot of these books need to be taught on Wednesday night series, because it'll help the preacher, the pastor, preparing and teaching, but more other people.
It's a great start. One of Brother Hiles, one of my favorite books of his has a horrible title and a worse cover, and it's called How to Treat Different Types of Church Members. And I was like,
isn't that a horrible cover?
Who cares how to treat different types of church members? And the cover is just horrendous. And but the book is so
fantastic.
good.
Yeah.
I had just taught a long Bible study, a year and a half or two, and I was getting ready to go into another long Bible study. So I'll say, let me take this book and let me teach some of the chapters in it as a short, a few-week Bible study. And I called it Godly People Skills, okay? Because that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's how to get along with those people, the people skills. There's more in the Bible between man-to-man relationship than there is between God and man relationship. It's amazing. Of the 10 Commandments, 6 are man-to-man. And so I started teaching that, ended up teaching for a year and a half on godly people skills, but that was the starter of that book. Yeah. And then the Bible just opens up and opens up and opens up. And how many principles are taught on being able to work with and get along with people.
Literally, I was in my pulpit teaching a Wednesday night Bible study, and something popped in my head, and I would literally take my pen out, make a little note.
Yep.
It seemed like one door opened to another door that opened to another. I did Salvation Made Simple, I think it's the title of my book. And it's 36 weeks. So about 15 into it, my wife said to me on a Wednesday night, she said, if this thing is so simple, why is it taking you so long?
But it does, to fix all the other people's misunderstandings of Salvation Made Simple, it does take a lot of time. I've done so many podcasts on, I call it sound doctrine. There's no holes in it. This is sound. from the Calvinism to the repentance to the Lordship salvation, there's so many holes in that doctrine. The doctrine doesn't hold up. But true doctrine, you can't shoot any holes in it. That ship is sound. There's no holes in that. And I love that mental thought. But so many people get so messed up. They take this verse like, no, that's not what it's talking about. So that is really good, important. So where can they go to get your books?
Berean Publications, out of Jacksonville, Florida. Now, a lot of them are sold out now. We're reprinting and so on, so you have to be patient with us. The Just a Thought series, there's 10 of those, and they're just devotional thoughts that I put out. But boy, for pastors, I think that would be good.
How many times just one idea, one thought, and Brother Howell's taught us with the 3x5 cards, and now we use a phone with Evernote, but man, any thought that comes down, boy, you put that down, the thoughts that are just, wow, what a great truth, just came from a little thought, and build it out.
Well, those are just 10 of those books, but man, they're great sermon starters. But see, that's what happens to me. I could read something 1,000 times, and then all of a sudden, boom, it jumps up and grabs you, and you go, wow, how come I didn't see that before?
Some of the best sermons ever. I love this. I'm sure you've had this, but there's a couple in my office, and they're just having all kind of problems, and I'm trying to help them, and they're talking to me about problems, and while they're telling me their problem, in my brain I'm going, I have no clue. I have no idea how to help this couple. So they're talking, and I'm praying, dear God, please, lend me 3 loaves. God, give me something to help these dear people. I don't know what to do or what to tell them. And then just amazing, boy, God through your Spirit puts a thought there. It's like, and then you tell them, and you get done, it's like, wow, that's really good. Hold on a second. You write it down because you realize how good that was. And it was to help those people, and God opened up.
You know what they say? Our pastor is so wise. I was in Wyoming with Brother Hiles on a Tuesday morning. I preached first, he preached second. And he slammed it out of the ballpark. And I was taking my breath away. It was so powerful. Got in the van. I said, Brother Hiles, where in the world did you get that? He said, out of the Bible. Y'all try reading it.
I like the one when Brother Rice, Dr. Alice calls Brother Rice, and Brother Rice, what are you doing? He goes, I'm reading one of your sermons, trying to find some scripture to go with it. And I joke with people now, sarcasm is our love language. If you can pick on people and tease them, then you really care about them. But
he picked on me. If you go back to the videotapes of pastor school, I sit in the same pie section. He picked on me in every session. I walked out one day, and a bunch of pastors out in the hallway. And one of them said, boy, I bet that makes you mad, him picking on you like that. I said, nah, you're just mad because he doesn't know you.
But it's amazing. I know there's a staff member that personality the people didn't like him, didn't get along, and he just rubbed them wrong. He's just different. And Brother Howes went to him and said, if you let me, he said, I'll help the people that love you. And he's like, yes, please. And so he became the butt of every joke. He became the guy he picked on. And it was like, oh, whoa. And it just drew people to him and helped that. And people don't understand that. They think he's being
My
mean.
wife leaned over to me one time at pastor school, and she said, now you know why he's picking on you, don't you? And I said, well, what are you saying? She said, you're such a rough preacher. He's trying to get people to love you. And I said, thanks, honey.
Thanks,
I needed
that. Years ago, my brother was in our church, and I'd pick on him and tease him and things, and his father-in-law was in our church and came to me and said, why do you do that to him all the time? Why are you mean? Why are you always picking on him? And I said, you know my brother. His personality rubs people wrong, and a lot of people don't like him. And so I'm trying to help people to like him, but also people in our church need to see that we have a good relationship. So I pick on my wife, I pick on my parents, I pick on my brother, because our whole church, it gives us security to know I can't pick on my wife like that if we don't have a good marriage. Okay? I can't pick on my parents or my brother if we don't have a good relationship. When they see he can be that way with his wife, it gives them security. They're good, because you can't do that if it's not. And I think Mrs. Howes was so Miss Beverly Howes was so proper and petite and everything, and didn't like to be all that. And there was a time when she didn't want to be a part of all the jokes and all that. And so Brother Howes, sure, that's when people think, oh, there must be something going on, And it's like, no, she's private. She doesn't want all that. And but it's amazing how when you can pick on them, it lets them know you've got a good relationship.
One of the funniest stories is when Mrs. Slaughter, Mrs. Hiles' mother, was staying with him. She was very ill, very ill. So Brother Hiles would call home between Sunday school and church. And so Mrs. Hiles picked up the phone. He said, is the backslider home? She said, no, he's teaching Sunday school right now. That's funny to me.
That is great. That is great. So we were just about done with the podcast with Dr. Gray, and my computer said, hard drive is full. So this video was almost 15 gigabytes to record, so I had to go clear some things off. But hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions for Dr. Gray, let us know. I'm sure we'll have him on again. God bless you, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Fundamental Baptist Podcast. If you have any questions, you can email us at thefundamentalbaptistpodcast@gmail.com.